morning from Vietnam, Constance. Thanks a lot for spending your evening joining our Inside Sharing and share your stories with our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners, we want to say thank you to you.
Oh, thank you, Ha. I'm honored to be asked to be on and looking forward to our conversation.
And earlier of this conversation, I told you that since you and your family haven't been to Vietnam, please accept our formal invitation to join. And if you, Michael, Heidi, or Eva ever plan to travel, please consider Vietnam, and I'll be so honored to take you guys out and show you how beautiful our country.
Thank you. And if you find yourself in Atlanta, Georgia, we have a very big airport here.
I know.
Let me know, and I will introduce you to Southern cuisine.
Absolutely. And Constance, in our culture, it's very honored if we can have you to do a little introduction about who you are and the work that you do. Would you do that for us, please?
Oh, sure. I would love to. So the work that I do is advising boards, so boards of directors or boards of trustees. I advise boards and senior executives. Most of my individual executive clients are CEOs, although some are executive vice presidents or business unit heads. And I help them with high stakes decisions. So high stakes decision could be anything from should we acquire this company or not, or should we divest of this company or not, or it could be something like who should I hire for this important role, or how do I get out of this problem that we're having? We're stuck in some way. And I would say that a very common reason why I get involved, although I promise you no one uses these words, but they'll call me and tell me what they believe is wrong. And when I get involved, I realize they're stuck. And they're not stuck because there's anything wrong with them. My clients are all very smart people. They are often very successful and have long histories of success in one or more companies, but they're human beings. And so my job is to first form a trusting relationship with them. And that's done by talking about their business, not mine. That's boring for people to hear you go on and on about all the details of your business, but to jump right in with them and have them tell me what's going on. And then slowly, as trust is built, they disclose more. And then I will sometimes go out and collect my own information in various ways. And then we talk about what they can do. So those relationships typically go on for a year or sometimes more. It just depends on the situation.
Wow. Constant. Those executives and CEOs are the people that are very smart. They make very big decisions for the companies that they're leading, right? And then now you are the person that helping them to make better decisions. So in this conversation, we're gonna explore the journey that leading to what you are doing now. All right. So and let's travel in time together. Would you?
Okay, let's do it. Yeah.
When I was young, Constance, I wanted to become an astronaut, and wearing a suit and jumping to different planets seems so cool to me. But life didn't give me any chance to do anything close to what I wanted when I was young. So, at young age, what was your dream about your future, though?
I had two dreams. One was I wanted to be a professional singer. And I did a lot of singing as I was growing up. I was in choruses and choirs, and I was put in an adult choir at a young age. I think I was 12 when I was starting to sing with adults because I had a big voice. And and then in high school I sang in different school performances. And I would win a talent competition here and there. And my friend Susan and I would sing at the local donut shop in the town I grew up in. And we would just walk in and the owner would say, "Hi, are you going to sing for us?" And she had a 12-string Gibson guitar that she let me play. We had a lot of fun, but I did not, I realized as I got older that I hadn't had individual vocal training. And I slowly, I guess I got daunted by the prospects. And the second thing I wanted to be was actually what I turned out to be, a psychologist. But I told more people about the singer part. I told fewer people about the psychologist part, partly because I couldn't see the path to it. I didn't understand that I would be in school a long, long, long time, and that being good with people is it's just table stakes, requires a lot of education. So it was a very winding path to become a psychologist, but I'm really happy that worked out.
Was there anyone that role model or become a influencers for you to have the dream of becoming a psychologist?
Not really. In the high school that I went to, so I was very struck when you said you wanted to be an astronaut, because I grew up in Cocoa Beach, Florida, which is this close to Cape Canaveral. And Cape Canaveral is the chunk of land that sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean, where Cape Kennedy is, where the Kennedy Space Center, is located. So I grew up literally with the space program. The original astronauts actually they lived in Cocoa Beach part of the time. You might bump into them in town. Alan Shepard came to our elementary school. And I really was surrounded by engineers, aerospace engineers and test pilots, and the dads in town, a lot of them did that. And of course, we had doctors and pharmacists and things like that, but it was a small town, and psychology was more mysterious. But the high school I went to was a public high school. It was extremely good. And we got to take classes like marine biology. For example, we dissected lemon sharks in 10th grade. And of course, we didn't realize how privileged we were. We just thought this was normal. But we got to take psychology and sociology and philosophy, and I was just absolutely in heaven with that. But I didn't know anyone that was a psychologist that I remember. So it was much later when I understood what the full range of what psychologists do, and it's enormous. People think therapist, but there's much more to it than that.
Wow. And then when you found your love for psychology, then tell us the journey that take you after that. Can you tell us?
Oh my gosh. Well, I put that, I went to college at the traditional age, and I was a political science major. And I told my parents that I would go to law school. And in hindsight, that was really because that was an approved path. As far as my parents were concerned, if I had said I'm going to be a psychologist, they would have said probably not. And so I went to college as a poli-sci major, but I dropped out of college after 2 years. I was really sick of being a student, just sick of it. So I dropped out of college, and I'm going to fast forward. So fast forward 16 years. I'm now the mother of 2 teenagers. I'm a stockbroker. I was a stockbroker for a few years. I had been in sales before that. I'll spare you all the gory details. And I really hated my job as a stockbroker. And my husband, Michael, said, well, what is it you really want to do? And I said, I want to go back to school, and I want to be a psychologist. And he said, then that's what you should do. And I was shocked. I thought, wait a minute. And I started telling him all the reasons why that was not feasible. And he said, we'll figure it out. And so we did. So I went back to school to undergrad, and I finished my undergrad. And that's where I started having mentors and people that I could look up to who said to me, yes, you can do this. Yes, I worried that I wasn't smart enough or wasn't whatever, oh, I'm not good at math. The statistics are going to be awful. Turns out I'm great at statistics. I just can't do arithmetic. Don't ask me to add a column of numbers. So, and in the process, I went into therapy myself and just really loved it. I thought, this is great. I'm going to explore things. I'll be a better person. This is great. So I went from getting my undergrad degree at the University of North Carolina in Asheville, which is a liberal arts public university. Got a fabulous education and went straight into a doctoral program in Atlanta at Georgia State University. So I got my PhD in, a long time ago. Got my PhD. I was a grown-up by the time I finished, and I had the wardrobe from when I was a stockbroker. So I decided, although my concentration was clinical, I also studied organizational along the way and decision science. And so when I spun out of my residency program, which was at the end and did my dissertation, I went to a consulting firm to work. So I've actually never been a practicing therapist since I was a grad student. As a grad student, you do a lot of therapy work, and your own, and you become a therapist. But I have not done that since I finished school. And the reason why I got propelled to go to psychology from being a stockbroker is I was and I remain haunted by what leads smart people to do things that are not in their best interest. And I had to learn that when we do things that are ill-advised, or maybe, your friends and family stand back and say, well, that was stupid. It's not because people are stupid. It's because they're human. And I began to learn more about that. And then later I discovered the field of behavioral economics, and it was just like my whole world opened up.
Wow. So Constance, tell Michael that he was so kind to sit down with you, after the 16 years you've married, right? And you said that 16 years fast forward, that he sat down with you and asked you the beautiful question, what is it that you want to do, right?
Yeah.
And that, we have Constance that doing so well to help people to make better decisions. And I want to ask you the question, how did you feel to go back to school and get back to the psychology major back then?
Oh, it was so great. It was so great. I just thought, how lucky to be a grown-up, a person with a family, and be able to spend my time being a student. I mean, it's very fortunate, and it made me, it really changed my life. It changed my family's lives for the better. Michael likes to say I'm the best investment he ever made. But I always realized how fortunate I was that we could do that. Now it did mean we had less money, and it did mean some sacrifices, because of the financial situation. But we had a house, and we had cars, and we had healthcare, and we had what we needed. So it wasn't the sacrifice like some people make. But it's made me a real proponent of education, much more than I was. And in fact, I'm on the board of trustees of Mary Baldwin University, which is in Stanton, Virginia. And part of the mission of Mary Baldwin is to help people gain access to education that might not otherwise, so that they may have successful lives and raise the standard of living for themselves and their families. And we know that that's what higher education does. So it really, but I just lucked out. I went to school in the town where I was living, and I had great professors. Thank you, Tracy Brown, Ann Weber, Lisa Friedman. I just have to go down the list. Ted Seitz, who's no longer living, but I had great encouragement there. And then I went to graduate school, and it's hard. It was much harder than you can't really conceptualize the difficulty, and you get there and you think, oh, I think they let me in by mistake. No, this is, but again, I loved it. I felt privileged, and it is a privilege to have access to higher education.
But Constance, a lot of us, do the things that we don't want to do because of, and then there's always a hidden dreams that we always wanted to do, but we, for a lot of different reasons that hold us back from doing that. So
Yeah.
back then, what did you and Michael talk to each other, supporting each other? What did you guys do to make sure that you can pursue not only a degree in psychology, but go all the way up into PhD, and that takes a lot of time. So teach us the way that you guys communicate, so that whoever listen to this conversation, they can practice and whatever that they can find their way to pursue their dreams. Though.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's really important to have people around you that believe in you, that know that you can do it. And Michael and I have this funny dynamic where, and I have this with some of my friends. It's so interesting where we're in different places. So if I'm saying, I don't think I can do this, then Michael or my friend Linda or my friend Lorraine will say, you just haven't done it yet. And when you asked me before we started the recording for the podcast if I'd been to Vietnam, my answer was not yet. Not yet. I didn't say no. I said not yet. Because holding out possibilities for yourself is an important aspect of having a mindset of growth and vibrancy. And, not knowing how you're going to do something doesn't mean you can't do it. I think that the thing that really hurts people, and it grieves me when I see it, is if you have a spouse or a partner or family who discourage and who say things like, oh, you can't do that. Or, well, why are you going to get a degree in psychology? That's useless. Not useless. But sometimes in families or in friends group, there is envy or there's a fear that one person will rise up. And in Canada, they have this saying about the tallest poppy gets whacked. So you have to be, you have to stay where your peer group is. Otherwise, you could be criticized for being too big for your britches. That's a Southern saying. But I was lucky, and I was lucky because I'm married to Michael, but I was also smart to marry him. And he is my second husband. So I just say that. We had been married less than 3 years when I announced that I hated my job. So we were newly married, and we really had, we had enough. I mean, we had what we needed, but I think our net worth was probably, it was very low. It was very low. So he encouraged me, even though doing so and supporting me through school carried a lot of risk. So that's I was like, yeah. Wow. Yeah. But I interviewed him for the job, so I was very careful.
So the Constance, from the graduations and on to the works that you are doing now, there's also a big gap,
Yes.
there. So tell us how that journey took place, though.
Oh, that is a really fun. That's a really fun story. So I joined after graduate school. I taught for a year while I was doing my dissertation, and while I was doing that, I was looking for a job in a consulting firm. And I interviewed with a few, and I landed in one, and right away, immediately, I think my first month or two, I was in a boardroom. I was meeting with a board about helping them to choose their next CEO and then helping that CEO. So I think of it as CEO transition. Some psychologists talk about doing CEO selection, where they do assessments, and that's part of what I do, but it really starts way back here with what does the organization need in its next leader? How do you articulate that in terms of, knowledge and technical skill, of course, but what are the attributes and behaviors that will be best for the company? And then how do you help that person land? So that entire process could take 18 months to 2 years, something like that. So I stayed with that consulting firm for 12 years and became a partner. And I helped the firm grow its board services practice, which includes CEO transitions, board dynamics, crises, boards that fight with each other. Obviously, I can't tell you any of those names. But using the skills of a psychologist with a hefty dose of business acumen. So after 12 years, I decided that I learned a lot. I think when you are an employee, if you show an eagerness and an aptitude to learn and learn and learn and learn, and then apply what you know for the good of the organization, you can have a really great career. Yeah. And I traveled all over. I went to Dubai on a week's notice. I mean, it was sort of crazy sometimes, but I really loved it. And so I've been on my own since 2010. And now my practice is limited to advising boards and very senior executives. And then I have a little piece of my practice over here where I work with individuals who are business owners. Most of them are consultants. Many of them are psychologists. And I help them learn how to use what they know as a psychologist in the context of business. Because sometimes when you've been in academia for a long time, it's easy for people to tell by the way you talk and the way you write. And it's not that you have to let go of everything you know, it's just you have to wrap it in a new context. And some people are very adept at doing that, and they build. I have one client that she doubled her revenue in 1 year with me helping her. And it's thrilling to see a client that well. It's just thrilling.
Beautiful. Constance, I want to bring you back onto 2010. And that is when you make partner at your at the consulting firm, right? And but you decided to leave what again was stable with good and good income, good status and everything to practice solo. So
yeah.
when that what message did you talk to yourself or with Michael that made you to go and make that decision again though?
I really wanted to be able to have autonomy. And even as a partner in a firm, you have to think about what's best for the firm as a whole. And that means that sometimes big decisions or big ideas that you have take a long time to bring into reality. And I found that while I understood why, it didn't suit me, or it suited me fine for a time, and then it just didn't suit me anymore. I also wanted very much to practice using value-based fees, which is something I learned from my mentor, Alan Weiss. His book, $1 Million Consulting, is just, if you read his book and apply it, and especially if you hire him to work with you directly, it's utterly life-changing. Absolutely life-changing. And I had been following his work while I was at the firm and trying to implement some of the ideas. And I was successful to a point, but I wanted to be able to implement more of those ideas and break away from time-based fees and break away from things that I thought they're very traditional in consulting, but I didn't like them, like sending your client invoices for your plane, your hotel, your dinner. I don't do that anymore.
Mm.
I absorb the expenses that I incur
Mm.
to help my clients, not because clients mind paying the invoices for it. It's just a nuisance.
Mm.
You're going to send a CEO an invoice for, I don't know, $932.42. It's, and my clients have reported to me how much they like that they know that fee is it. Now, I do say that if the expenses rise to the level of a certain percentage of the fee, that I will charge them, but don't tell anyone. I never do.
We don't.
And, if you're working with a CEO, they really like to know, this is the investment I'm going to make. These are the outcomes we're working toward together.
Mm.
These are the measures we're looking at. And I learned all of that from Alan Weiss, every bit of it. So anyone watching this that wants to do consulting or is a consultant, if you don't know him and his work,
follow.
I would learn more about him.
Now go to your work. All right. You are dealing with a lot of people who are extremely smart, extremely great at what they do, but they also need help to make better decisions.
Yes.
What happened to them?
Well, they were born with a human brain and they were born with a human nervous system. So people like to say we make decisions that are data driven and rational. And data is wonderful, rational is wonderful, but what if you're making the wrong decision with your data and your rationale? Or what if there is a social environment? I mean, human beings operate in a social context. And this is not woo-woo science. This is hard science, that the human beings around us, whether virtually like you and I are, or literally physically around us, have an influence on us. And I mean, any CEO can tell you that they have to be very discerning about what people are proposing for them. You should do this and we should do that. It isn't that they don't trust the other people or they don't think they're smart, but we all have some self-interest, and that is normal. That is not, I mean, some people are selfish, but I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about well-intended, smart people that we have some things that influence we are not aware of. And so I help leaders mostly by asking questions. And I help them in one of the ways I help them is I help them understand what decision they need to be making. And sometimes they're trying to make a decision that's not getting at the root of what's going to be the best leverage for them to get where they want to go. So a common example of that is when a leader says, well, I think we need to do a strategic retreat. And I say, okay, why do you want that? And they look at me like I have three heads. Well, what do you mean? Isn't it obvious? I say, no. What is the outcome you're seeking? And they'll talk. And a fair percentage of the time, what gets revealed is they're frustrated with their team because they don't think strategically. Strategic thinking is something that can be developed. But it might not happen in a 2-day retreat, especially if you're unconscious that that's the outcome you're looking for. You see what I mean? That's just a small example. Or people will ask, they'll talk about margin and velocity, and they're trying to improve their EBITDA and they want their share price to go up. And they're looking at acquisitions and mergers and innovation, which is fine. That's all great and fine. But they've got these two business units over here that are just pulling them down. It's like having too much baggage on your jet, and I'll say, well, what about those? Are you what are you thinking about those? And they're like, oh, those are a pain. And, you know, but da 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 da. And I say, well, let's look at that a little more closely. Because it's easier for most people to add than subtract. In fact, there's an entire book written about this. The book is called Subtract, and it's by a professor, I think he's at Wharton. And he makes a very compelling argument, and I certainly have seen it in my work. And I see it in my own life. Ask any woman who likes clothes. When was the last time she took things out of her closet and donated them?
I'll ask Vivian this question the first
Ask
time that she
Vivian.
led it to Hanoi.
Yeah, ask Vivian. I know it's much easier for us to make acquisitions than to divest.
How is it working with those high stakes executives and CEO and ask them to listen to advices and look at the situation in different angles, Constance?
Well, initially, you know, any smart, normal executive would, I would meet with them and, you know, we'd have a conversation. Then we formalize an agreement to work together. And in the beginning, they are listening to my advice with some skepticism, which I think is normal and good. That's, if you're a consultant and you get offended by that, you're in the wrong job. They have to filter it through what they know about themselves and their company. So I typically don't start out making huge pieces of advice. Rather, I ask a lot of questions, and I'll ask them like, well, what have you tried or what have you thought of? And then my intervention early on is more often to reframe things for them. Rather than say, I don't think you should do that, or I think you should do this, or you should fire him. I may be thinking that, but I will ask a question. For example, the CFO is his colleagues don't like him. He does a good job technically, but he's really rough around the edges. People don't like him. And you've had to replace the controller twice in the last 18 months because of this tension. So I'll say to the CEO, what is this saying to the rest of your team? What message is the rest of your team getting that this person continues to behave badly? And by the way, is that person ever in the boardroom? Do they have a relationship with the audit committee? What are they saying? And so, and I try to help them see the issue differently and more broadly than the way they're seeing it. Later, when someone really trusts me, they'll say things like, what do you think I should do? And they're not asking me for reframing and question. They're saying, is this pen green or not? And I say, yes, that pen is green. But that, if you start out that way, I mean, I don't understand starting out that way. This probably, being a clinical psychologist by training is very helpful because it's more natural for me to want to build a working relationship first. That doesn't have to take months. That can happen. One of my clients right now, who's a CEO, in my first meeting with him, I helped him with an issue with his board. And he called me back a few days later and said, I you know, after we talked, I did this and it was brilliant. And thank you so much. Okay. Now that shifts it significantly, but it's really important to keep in mind that you're there in the best interest of your client and their organization. And that's a motivational piece that if people don't have that, I'm not sure how you help them get it. But there's lots of people like that in the world. I meet consultants all the time that are very, you know, they have terrific motivation and wonderful ethics.
Yeah, but there are also a lot of like you say earlier. That's a lot of us in the academia for so long. Then we lost the tensions to be in the business world also. So,
Yeah,
Constance,
yeah,
if I believe that there's a lot of psychologists out there wanna make an impact, wanna make leaders to become
yeah.
better leaders, right? So is there any if they want to be into that direction, do the work that you are doing, that been doing, so what would be some advices on the skills that they need to master now so that they can become better at what they do in the future?
So, are you asking me how someone who's a psychologist, and we know that
Yep.
at least in the United States, you can't call yourself a psychologist unless you have the terminal degree, which is a PhD.
Ah.
The exception to that are school psychologists. They are called psychologists with a master's degree, and I thank school psychologists because they do wonderful work.
Ah.
So if you get a PhD, you've been in school a long time and you've learned to write in passive voice. You've learned um, to provide evidence for what you're saying, cite research. I can't talk about theories of behavior change without talking about Prochaska, DiClemente, and Fisher. It's obnoxious if you're not in an academic environment. So first of all, if I'm working with someone who's a psychologist who's never done consulting, I tell them that they need to develop a working knowledge of business, and they need to respect business people. If you don't like business people, and some psychologists don't, it's a bad profession to be in, because people have a way of knowing that you don't respect them. And then I would tell them that when you're a consultant and a psychologist, what you're doing is you're using every ounce of your knowledge and experience as a psychologist, but what comes out of your mouth needs to be directed at your client's objectives, and you need to use the language of business. So sometimes I'll be sitting with a client and I'm thinking in my head, oh man, well, that was projection. But saying that isn't helpful. And so we have to learn that the way we speak when we're with each other is not necessarily helpful to a corporate client. Now, I have clients that have master's degrees in psychology, and they'll sometimes sort of like wink at me or elbow me and say something psychology-y, and they think it's kind of funny. But in general, I think adopting the language of business, and also managing yourself to realize that you're not giving up anything that you learn or any experience you have as a psychologist. You're going to use it, but you're going to wrap it in the language of business.
I see.
And that's what people resonate with you much more if you are conversant in business. I'm not an expert in business. I can read a financial statement, but people that are really good in finance can look at financial numbers and they see relationships between numbers that I don't.
Wow.
And that's okay. That's okay. But what I can do is I can tell them if there's something wrong, if something's going wrong in finance. And I did this with a client where I said, you need to send some people in there to figure out what's going on. There's something wrong. I think I said something's fishy in finance. It was a little colloquial, I admit, but my client didn't listen to me for a few months, and then later they had reason to go look at things, and they had a dishonest CFO and a dishonest controller, and they were embezzling.
Wow.
And all I knew was I knew the people side of it. But hadn't looked at the number, and they had very good auditors. These guys were very good at hiding what they were doing, in all fairness.
Wow.
That was very sad.
Wow. Constance, earlier you said that you had two dreams when you were young.
Yeah.
One is becoming a professional singer, and you've been singing and
Yes.
then got a award, right? And the second was become a psychologist, but then you and you disconnect with that for a long time, then came back and pursued for being a
Mhm.
psychologist.
Yeah.
But I found out that you also have your third one, that loves to write. So you have two books already out there, and then you have your third one's coming. Tell us, since when you start
Oh,
to build the love for writing, though?
you found me out. I developed a love for writing actually when I was a stockbroker, but I wasn't really very good at it. Um, and so I sort of kept that. And when I was at my consulting firm that I started with, I started writing articles for magazines like Chief Executive Magazine. And I was good enough, but not great. Since then, I've become a student of writing, and I've had more than one writing coach,
Hmm.
which I encourage people to do. Um, and I found that writing was a way that I could offer people ideas or advice to more people than I could meet one on one.
Yeah.
And so, writing a book or recording videos about my ideas are very well, the videos are free. But a book, if it's, $30, $29, it gives access for more people who might be interested in what I have to say or my ideas. And the writing is, I've found that writing is also helpful to the writer because it helps you know what you think. It
Hmm.
sounds kind of weird, but sometimes when I'm writing, I don't exactly know what I'm thinking until I start writing. And then it forces me to get clarity on an idea. And I've found that I like it most of the time. Sometimes when I'm writing, I hate it because
Hmm.
I can't get the words to come out the way I want or the right words to come out. And once again, my solution to that is, I call a friend. I'll call my friend Linda, Dr. Linda Henman, and I'll say, I'm trying to write about this and I'm really stuck. And she'll ask me one question and I'll talk for 10 minutes. And she'll say, turn on your voice memo. And so I'm talking to my friend, and then things come out that I didn't know were in there. So
Yeah.
people have different ways of doing that. But if for anyone that wants to write, you can start by writing short newsletters and post them on LinkedIn. It doesn't cost you a thing.
Uh-huh.
And you get your ideas, and then you see if people respond to your idea.
Hmm.
You don't need 20,000 views to get feedback on your idea. And the feedback is simply, do people look at it? Do they read it? Do they say things like great ideas?
Hmm.
I mean, it takes a little bit of effort to do that. And so I encourage people to write if they want to. But I actually, you made me think of something I hadn't thought of in years. I wrote poetry when I was a kid.
Oh, you did.
I did. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad poetry,
So
but
your
I liked it.
yeah, your third book is coming in April, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so
April 18th.
yeah, April
Yeah.
18th. So it's not a time for us to talk about the first and the second. Let's talk about the book that you're about to publish. So tell us what it is and who the audience that you're targeting for that book.
Yes. Thank you for asking, first of all. I mean, every author that's about to launch a book wants to talk about it. The title of the book is Meta Leadership, META hyphen leadership. Meta is from the Greek and it simply means above or beyond. So we think metaphysics,
Mm.
meta-analysis, and things like that. And I was really mad at Mark Zuckerberg for calling his company Meta, because that sort of, I was like, are you reading my mind, dude? Because I was thinking about this for a long time. As you, I'm sure, know, it takes a long time to do a book.
Yeah.
Um, just the writing itself usually takes 6 months, but you've got a lot of research and headwork to do before then. The subtitle is How to See What Others Don't and Make Great Decisions. So I am the decision doctor. I filed for the trademark on that, and I have the trademark on that. And I use that in my work. And so I'm always thinking about decisions. So the audience for the book are leaders, but it's anybody who needs to make important decisions. So it could be parents, for example. And as people have talked to me about the book, they've suggested applications for my ideas that I had not thought of when I wrote the book. So I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. Yes, I could. Someone asked me, well, could this apply to parents? And I said, yes. And I rattled off an example, and I thought, holy cow, I didn't. That's not what I was planning. So the book is the model I propose to help people make better decisions and see what others don't is the 3-part model. And it's having to do with thinking about your thinking is the first section of the book. How do you think about your own thinking? Not what you're thinking only, but how. The second part is what is influencing you as you think and make decisions. There's a lot about emotion and the understanding that emotion is always a part of our decision making. There's wonderful research from neuroscience and Lisa Feldman Barrett, who is at, I think she's at, I'm not going to say her university because I don't want to get it wrong. But if anyone watching this is interested, look up Lisa Feldman Barrett. She's a wonderful neuroscientist. She's a wonderful writer. And there are 2 other neuroscientists that I would also say. Heather Berlin is one. And the neuroscience shows us very clearly that there's no such thing as disconnecting your emotions from your thoughts. These things are bidirectional and they're intertwined. It doesn't mean that we're at the mercy of our worst thoughts and feelings. So listeners, don't be afraid. And then the third part is really about behavior. In particular, what are our habits of behavior, and how do habits of behavior that are adopted by a group of people become a culture? So in an organization, people say, oh, our culture is this, our culture is that. But really culture is, what do we do around here? How do we act? How do we make decisions? And when you bring in an outsider like me, it's easy for me to see what that is, even though it's harder to see it if you're in the middle of it. So a silly example of culture is, I grew up with an Australian grandmother, and that the way you make a proper pot of tea, you probably know this, you put boiling water in the pot, and you swish it, and you heat the pot up, and then you make the tea. Pour that out, and then you make the tea. And I had a friend at our house one day when I was a kid, and I was doing that. She said, what are you doing? And I said, well, this is how you make tea. She goes, that's not how we make tea. And it was like, So that's a tiny, everyday example of what I talk about in the book. We have habits of behavior, and we are unconscious about some of it, and we are unconscious of where it came from. So if you get meta about it, you can actually sit back and say, in fact, I say in my book, we all need to stop leaning in and start leaning back. Apologies to Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. What motivates you to write meta leadership, though, Constance?
I feel like a lot of books and there are a lot of books on leadership, and there are more published every day. And sometimes people say, well, why would you write about that? There's already so many books on leadership. My answer is there should be. It's enormously important.
Yeah.
I felt like a lot of books on leadership are very specific. So they take the reader through something specific, like how do you make decisions about your IT system? How do you make decisions about your strategy? How do you do this? Some of them are very how-to, some are more conceptual, but there are many, many, many that are specific. And I wanted to bring the reader up to the meta level and say, if you have more awareness of your thinking, your emotions, and your habits of behavior, you can make better choices about what you ought to be deciding about in the first place. And so I wanted to write a book that was on a different level. And I have to say, I couldn't have written this book until now.
Wow.
Because this thought process has been happening for me barely in my awareness for probably 15 years.
Wow.
Meanwhile, I've actually written 3 other books. I brought out a book 2 weeks ago with 2 dear friends, and it's called The Vibrant Board, and it's about governance. And it's available on Kindle only. We didn't have any books printed, but we just decided today that we're actually going to print some copies of that book. So thank you for asking about meta leadership. I really am very excited about the concept and happy that people have shown me, the author, how the concept can be applied to everyday life, whether you're a parent, a sibling, a young adult.
Yeah.
My grandson is choosing a college right now, and that's hard, and he's being influenced.
Yeah. Constance,
by his friends, by his parents. It's human. Unless you're a hermit, you're going to be influenced by other human beings.
I love this. I definitely will order
Good.
one for me, one for Vivian, and one for my best friend. But by then, I will ask you to sign up on those so that we can read and we can keep it in our, like library also. All right. And then
Yeah.
that's interesting to me because when I first came back to Vietnam, I was influenced by one of the very, very famous person here, and his name is Hung. Um, and he told me that for us to be successful, we have to be able to see things that people yet seen, and then we have to be yes. So I learned the word yet seen from you, or get yet seen, and then take action on that. And your book, help us to develop the 3 things that if we can master those, really think about our thinking, then the influence that we have and our behavior on that affect our ability to see things, then definitely, I would love to make improvements on those areas and then learn from your expertise, having great people in your line of works. Definitely those worth.
Well, thank you for reviewing that after I, talked for a long time about it, because my hope was that this 3-part idea of meta leadership would be very easy for people to grasp and be memorable so that they can hear it, read it, put it in their brain, and then it's theirs. They walk around with it. They can use it when it's appropriate for them. That's my hope. I'm very much a pragmatist. And that was one of the things about being in academia for so long, was I kept trying to understand how I could use things. And psychology is a fairly new science, so there's a fair amount of things we don't know. And that's fair, because science is always about exploration, even physics. We're always exploring.
I have 2 last questions for you today. All right.
Okay.
And
they better be easy.
It is.
Okay.
The first question is about thinking. So coincidentally, we talked about that one, and you wrote a book to help people to think better, to see things better. And my wife and I, we've been on the quest to help people to also improve their ability to think. Because every conversation that we had, we always ask experts like you these questions. How have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think over the years, Constance?
I read a lot. I don't think I read as much as I realize how much I read when I'm in a conversation with someone and I have ideas exploding in my head, or I'll say something like, you really should read Lisa Feldman Barrett's 7.5. Let me see if I can see. It's too far away. I was going to hold the book up for you. But if you just look her up. So I think reading is essential. I think having two qualities are very essential. One is empathy. So when you encounter people that are different from you, you can't learn anything from them if you reject them because they're different. You won't learn a thing. And you won't learn a thing for two reasons. One is you're not listening, but the other is your rejection of them will be felt by them. So they're not going to talk to you, or they're not going to talk to you with any intention to be connected. So empathy is important, and then and that's very connected to the notion of non-judgment from Buddhism. We had talked about that earlier. And then the other is that we have to be willing to let go of what we thought was true when we are now faced with something that shows us. It's very hard for human beings to do that, especially things that are connected to the culture that we're in. So all of our friends believe X, so we believe X, and I meet you, and you tell me something different. If I'm going to listen to you and listen deeply, and you're going to explain to me and share with me more than I knew, but I'm unwilling, I'm spending my whole time not really listening, but holding on to what I believe as though we're in a battle, I will not learn and I will not expand my knowledge. And this is hard. I mean, I'm telling you this, but it might sound to the listener like, oh, I'm really good at this. No, I do it too. All the things I help other people with, I do. I hold on to what I thought was true. And luckily, my husband is a really good thought partner for me. And so if he's trying to show me that something I think is not true, he'll just keep at it in a really good way, and sometimes with humor. And that helps me cross the bridge from holding on too tightly to letting go. And then usually there's some laughter at the end of that. We had a fight one time about, we were putting down hardwood floor in a room, and I got a D in geometry. So why I was so stuck on being right, I couldn't tell you. But I was sure that I was right about how some calculation about, and it took him, I don't know how long. He's in the other room. That's his office through those doors. He could probably come in here and tell you. It took a really long time. And all of a sudden I realized I was wrong. And I just slumped down on the floor and said, I've been wrong this whole time. And he goes, I know. And, but see, he had to have some empathy for me to keep trying to explain without getting angry. So I said we had a fight. It wasn't like a fight where you scream and yell and tell the other person that they're an idiot. It wasn't that. It was an intellectual argument.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So I do it. I do it too.
I am really, really eager and curious to meet Michael, because I love, I look at the world. We have a lot of people like Michael, see how, he's been supporting you, how he's been along the journey to be there, and in the up and down, and it's so beautiful,
Yeah. He says a lot. He'll say, we'll figure it out, or we'll get through it.
Yeah.
Those are two things that he says if there's something hard, or I'm upset, or if I've lost something. I'll say, I can't find these earrings. And he'll say, you'll find them.
Well, Definitely tell him I say hello, please. Okay, I will really
I
love to
will.
meet him.
I will.
The last question, Constant, is about the future. So we've been travel the past. I want to travel to the future a little bit
Oh
also.
yeah.
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 Is there anything that exciting you are working on? You want to share with us so that we, as and the audience, can celebrate with you in advance.
It is just, it's remarkable that we're speaking today. You know, we were supposed to speak, what, 10 days ago or so,
Yeah.
and technology interfered and we couldn't speak. And I wouldn't have given you the answer then that I'll give you now. And that
Oh.
is that I would also like to do a podcast.
Oh. Beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
my newsletter that your listeners, if they care to, can read on LinkedIn, or they can sign up on my website to receive it by email, because they're in both, the newsletters are in both places. But I had abandoned my newsletter for a few months while I was working on the book, and it's been recast. And the title of it is "The Decision Doctor is In." And I've been talking to my professional colleagues, peers. I started a peer group in the pandemic about the podcast, and what it would be is I would have guests on and I would ask them about decisions they've made in the past, you know, great decisions, and then we would take it apart as much as they're willing. I'm not going to probe in any painful sort of way, and then mistakes they've made, how that happened, what they're working on right now. And I would propose to have on people from all different walks of life in that show. And so my friends liked the idea. I mean, all four of them. And so I'm going to be working on that idea in the future.
Beautiful.
And that's, I guess that's the only exciting thing, other than, you know, our trip to Scotland this summer. And we're always planning our next international trip. We usually start plotting our next international trip on the flight home from the previous one. So that's exciting. And I'm sure that your listeners are well-traveled people. So I'm sure many of them have been to places that I've yet to see.
Wow, yet to see. I'm excited to listen to your podcast. So and, you know, I'll follow up with you when it's launched, and then I'll make sure that I'll be you know, subscribe and listen to them, because with the amazing people that you know, imagine how many good advice and lessons that, you know, we in the audience can learn from. And on a, you know, we are not alone in this world. Learning from other people is the best way to help us to grow. So definitely.
Great. Yeah, I think it's so lovely when you can see and hear someone talk about their ideas. It brings a new dimension to them.
Absolutely.
In a way that you can read their books, but seeing them is wonderful. And I wish some people would appear more often, like Daniel Kahneman. I'd love to see more of him.
Yeah.
Maybe you can get him on your podcast.
I
He
connected
has a
with
fascinating personal story.
I connected with him, and then I connected with his assistant, and to ask if he can spare some time with us. So we're waiting for their response at the moment. I love his work also, and I love the, you know, the story about him when he was little. You know, then he met the SS guy, then who, you know, back then kissed him, and that changed his life, and it's so amazing. I really want to bring that story up. Yeah.
Yes, and I think I like your podcast because you're exploring ideas that people are putting out into the world, but you're exploring who is the person who's doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, you are a man after my own heart. I think that's so fascinating.
Thanks, Constance.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for being so generous to join our show and share your amazing journey with us. I I really love to give you a hug in person one day, and I wish you all the best, Constance. Okay,
Thank you.
enjoy the
Thank you
launching.
for being Yeah, thank you for being generous and reaching out to me and inviting me. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Same to me. And please say hello to everybody at home, and that send out love and kisses from Vietnam to them. All right.
Oh, absolutely. And please give your daughter very good wishes for her college experience, which she'll be having in the United States. And we're lucky to have her be here, I'm sure.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye bye for now, Constance.
Bye.